Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this episode of One-on-One. I'm Martin Falls. Very interesting guest lined up for today's program. Jerome Boykin, the president of the NAACP for some 28 years now here in the area. But it's more than the NAACP. Where was Jerome raised? Where did he go to school? What makes him tick? What makes him laugh? On this show, we're going to go beyond the NAACP and find out more about Jerome Boykin. Don't go away. One-on-One is brought to you by the Law Office of Waits and Downer. And welcome back to One-on-One. I'm Martin Falls, very pleased to have with me Jerome Boykin. You know him as the president of the NAACP here in the area. But let me get it right, 28 years?
28 years. January 8, 1995.
I was trying to recall when we scheduled you for One-on-One. I said, when's the first time I met Jerome Boykin? And I couldn't put my finger on it because we run into each other on so many items and issues. But for the audience, take me back to the early issues you can remember.
I can remember back when, I was in kindergarten. Matter of fact, Greg Harding, who is now a school board member, we were best of friends. And I've been knowing Greg most of my life. And Greg and I would do things in the community that small kids would do. One of the things we would do is go around to the different houses, ring the doorbell, and take off running. So what I would do sometime, because Greg was faster than all of us, I would make sure that I had enough room to start running. I get him to go ring the doorbell, and I take off.
How did he get his nickname Dut?
Man, that's the name that come back, a long, long time.
Yeah.
Once someone said that name, and it stuck with him for the rest of his life.
And Greg was my wide receiver in Bantam League.
Man, that's up.
He was on one side and Will Percy was on the other.
Man.
Talk about talent.
Yeah.
Just throw the ball up.
And he'll go and get it.
Let him go get it.
Yeah, I remember one time in Bantam League football, I went to one of Greg's games and I was on my bike on the sideline and they kicked the ball off to Greg and they kicked it right to where I was on the side. And I told him, I said, take it all away. And he shook his head. He said, no. Sure enough, he took it all the way for a touchdown.
Greg was a great athlete. Where did you grow up? What area did you grow up in?
Several areas I grew up. One was when I was a young boy, Lafayette Street. I lived with my grandmother because my mother worked, Priscilla Matthews. She lived on Mad Street in Mechanicville. And I also lived on most of my young life on Stovall Street, where my mother lived.
Hey, your dad was a barber, right?
My dad was a licensed barber. His name was Camden Boykin.
But he died when you were relatively young, right?
Right. I lost my father when I was in the third grade. Him and some friends went on a fishing trip. The weather got bad and two of them drowned.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that. So your mama and your grandmother had to raise you.
Right.
Were they strict?
I'll tell you, my grandmother was strict. She didn't play. When she tell you to do something, you better do it. My mother was strict also. When she asked you to do something, you better do it. But I wasn't a trouble kid. I did get in some trouble, but it wasn't like it is, today. And I thank God for being in that era, raised by my grandmother and my mother.
But being the front man for the NAACP, you're constantly in the news, constantly in the know. Were you like that as a child? Did you always have that kind of confidence, or was that something that you had to build as you grew up?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm gonna tell you how I got involved for the NAACP.
Okay.
Greg Harding come to me one day, and he said, you need to be the president of the NAACP. I said, what make you think that? He said, man, for the type of guy that you are, you straightforward, I know you're gonna do a hell of a job. He said, you need to give it a try. Went home and I told my mother what Greg had said. She said, I think that's a good idea. She said, Jerome, you have already been trained for this job, so you need to do it. 28 years later, here I am.
What did she mean by being trained? Had she put you through a rigorous training herself?
Right. I mean, growing up, even as a young kid, the experience that I had, one was we integrated the Turbon Parish public school system. It was myself, my sister Connie Boykin, Doris Brown, and the late Nolan Douglas. We went to West Park School. And at that time, I really didn't understand, because I can tell you, we caught hell being the only four black students at an all-white school. Wow. And my mother used to talk to me every night, because I didn't want to go to school, because every day we went to school, we had to fight, deal with name calling every day at school. And my mother would sit down and talk to me every night and say, listen, you may not understand what's going on now because you're a kid, but as you get older, you would understand what you're doing. She said, this is all a part of society. This is something that you have to deal with as a black man. And I said, Mom, I don't want to go to school. She said, listen, you don't have a choice. I'm your mother, and I'm telling you, you have to go to school, you and your sisters.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
So she was not only big on education, but she was big on life's lessons.
Yes, I mean, my mother was a go-getter. She was a strong black woman. She helped people in the community get jobs. She spoke up for people in the community when she felt that they was being mistreated. She had this thing for poor people, though, homeless people, people in need. She have always had that. And also, I see where I got the politics from, because as a small boy, Greg and I and other people from the neighborhood, whatever candidate she would support, we would go around knocking on doors, giving out pamphlets and stuff for that candidate.
But she was a go-to person in elections. I can remember people campaigning, and they would have to go see Ms. Boykin, and they wanted her blessing.
All the time, Martin. I remember even as a small kid, U.S. Senator J. Bennett Johnson coming to my house. He was a U.S. Senator. Anytime the district attorney ran for office, the sheriffs, I can honestly tell you they all showed up in my living room at my mother's house.
What do you think gave her, and I'm gonna say power, because it was power, because anybody who was running for office, they went to see Ms. Boykin. They sat down with her, and she wasn't always easy on candidates.
No,
she wanted to know what they were about.
Right, she was very straightforward and strict. If you was a candidate and you come in and you sit down and you talk to her and you tell her you would do A, B, C, D, once you elected, she expect you to do A, B, C, D. Now, if you didn't do it and you came back to her the second time, she would tell you, no, I can't support you this time because you gave me your word you would do A, B, C, D, and you only did A, B.
Right.
And that's just the type of person she was. She was strict. She was easy to get along with, and that's how I am. And the reason I say that is because you will always know where she's coming from. She was not one to tell you one thing and then do something else. If she tell you she was gonna do something for you, you can go home and go to sleep at night. And that's just how I am, and that's where I get it from.
And I say, you come across, I'm gonna say it to the audience, he comes across as tough. Sometimes I've been covering you for so many years as president of the NAACP, but whenever I see you off of all that, you got a pretty good sense of humor.
Well, yes, you have to. You can't just go around mad all the time, every day. This job, you have to have tough skin. This job, you have to want to do it and believe it. I believe in my soul in what I do. You know, people say, well, how can you put up with being criticized for this or that or whatever? You have to have tough skin, Martin, and I have tough skin. I have a job to do. I do my job a lot of times when I leave home, I leave my feelings and everything at home.
But that's not easy to do.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
You are exactly right.
So
It's
how'd
not
you
easy.
how'd you condition yourself to be able to do that? I guess some people use the word compartmentalize. You got to do that, don't you?
Yes. I guess it's easy when you know who you are. Regardless of what names people call you, it's not the names that they call you. My mother always told me, it's not the names that people call you, it's the names that you answer to.
That's pretty profound.
And it made a lot of sense. And
Yeah.
I took that with me to all of my life.
So you talked about being called names when you were a child in school and all that. But take me through the schools that you went through and tell me a little bit about your educational background.
Well, I went, first school I went to was an all-black school. It was Southside School.
Yeah.
I went there in first grade. After that, my father filed a federal lawsuit to integrate the schools here in Terrebonne because, you know, Brown versus the Board of Education, that passed, and yet schools in Terrebonne Parish and a lot of other places still wasn't integrating. So in second grade, we was told by my mother and my father, and with the other four, Nolan, Douglas, and Doris Brown, and my sister Connie, listen, things are gonna change. The school you're going to is an all-white school. And we said, all-white school? They said, yes, you're going to all-white school. And when that morning came and we went, it was a hell of an experience going there.
But you experienced...
Because there was a lot of resistance
Yeah.
back then in that era.
And was that palatable to you? Could you sense it, or was it just a few kids, or was it the whole school?
As a young kid, it was most of the kids at the school. It wasn't all, but it seems like it was so many you would
Right.
think it was all, but it wasn't all. It was most of the kids there.
Because I never
But as
sensed that from Greg Harding when we played ball together. He was just one of the guys, had a great sense of humor and all that. So it's something that probably was generational, right?
Right.
The kids didn't believe in it, but the parents did, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I went to West Park School up till from second grade to fourth grade. Then after that, I went to Legion Park.
Yeah.
Then after I left Legion Park, eighth grade, I went to Houma Junior High. And from Houma Junior High, I graduated in 1978 from Terrebonne High School.
All right. Bowling grade 78, huh?
There you go.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
I know you went to the sheriff's department. Was it right after
Yeah, it was
high school?
Yeah, it was right after high school, about at least a year or two after high school.
Okay. What brought
went
you
to-
there?
Well, to be honest, my mother knew the sheriff, Roseanne.
Yeah.
And he was at my mother's house one day, and I was there. And the sheriff said, "Is your son still in school?" She said, "No, he graduated." And he said, she said, "Well, okay, well, he needs a job." So she talked to me and all, and she said, "Jerome, would you mind working at the sheriff's office, or do you want to work?" And I told her, yes, I think that'd be a good job to have, working at the Terrebonne Parish Sheriff's Office. Joined the Sheriff's Office in 1980, went to the Police Academy at Nichols State University, graduated out of the academy, worked for the Sheriff's Office for approximately 5 years. What happened during that time, up to the 5 years, I was involved in a serious accident to where I almost lost my life. I was patrolling one night and was involved in a head-on collision by a drunk driver. After that accident, I ended up having several surgeries, had back surgery and jaw surgery, a couple of other wrist surgery. And after that, the sheriff's office gave me a lifetime retirement. But that ended my career, that car accident.
Take me back to the accident. Were you conscious at the time, or did you go unconscious? And maybe if you were conscious, what was going through your mind? You were young at that point.
Yeah, what happened was at that point I was going to back up another unit, and the truck that was in the opposite lane going in the opposite direction, just all of a sudden came into my lane. All I can do is just hit the brake. And, we was involved in a head-on collision. I remember going in and out of consciousness at that time. The ambulance and all came, and they rushed me to the hospital.
How did that change your life or your outlook on life? A lot of people say when they're that near death that it completely changes them. Did it change you?
Yes, you don't want to take anything for granted. If you don't know if you're gonna live or die, you look at the world even different. I think I changed as a person, experienced that. Whatever you want to do, whatever you want to eat, whatever you want to say, you need to do it because life is short.
Right.
It's not as long as we think it is.
It flies by, doesn't it?
Quick.
Seems like just yesterday, me and you were on the news desk are doing different things, and now we're doing a one-on-one.
And
we're a little older.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. So when you graduated, was your mom still in, sometimes moms, they like to control the kids till the kids really get off and running. She seemed like she was maybe running a little interference for you.
Oh.
My son needs a job. And to Charlton Roseanne's, who was larger than life, wasn't he?
Right. I mean, he'll show up at the house and flamboyant, his nice suit and big cigar in his mouth. Man, and I tell you, he was something special, I tell you.
What was he like to work with? I can remember when I started HTV, he was still in it, right on the end of his term, and his health was failing. But he was, first of all, he was hard to understand. He was sort of quiet and sort of talked under his breath.
Right.
But was he intimidating to you when you first met him?
No, I guess liked him, his style. I mean, the way he got out of the car and just the way he talked. But I noticed even as a young boy, he had a good relationship with the African American community.
That he did.
Matter of fact, that's the reason why he was elected so many times that he was. He was the type of sheriff that got along with everybody. And he blended in wherever he was, whatever crowd he was with, he got along with people.
Yeah. And he always traveled with an entourage.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I tell you, man, he just had a different style than any other sheriff that I've come in contact with.
Yeah. He was unique.
Yeah, you're right.
There's no doubt about it.
Right, he make you laugh.
So obviously you met him somewhere before you went apply because he was going to visit your mom.
Right.
Did he make an impression? And when your mom said, I think maybe you ought to consider going to work for the sheriff's department, was that something internally that you went, oh no, I don't want to do that, or yes, I want to do that?
No, it made sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt that it was an opportunity to start a career. So I decided that it was good to do. And I'm glad I did experience law enforcement like I did.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. This one-on-one program has been brought to you by the law offices of Waits and Downer.